Stop scrolling. What I'm about to tell you will make you never look at shopping malls this same way again. This happened to me 3 months ago at Starmall Alabang, and I still wake up in cold sweats. If you work night shift security anywhere, you need to hear this. My name is Miguel Santos, and I used to be a security guard at Starmall Alabang. Used to be. After what happened that November night, I quit immediately and moved to Cebu. But the memories, they followed me. It started on my 3rd week on the job. I was assigned the graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The mall closes at 9 p.m. and by 10:30 it's completely empty except for us guards. At least, that's what we thought. The first sign something was wrong? The elevators. Every night around 2:17 a.m., and I know the exact time because I started timing it, the elevator on the east wing would ding. The doors would open to an empty car. My supervisor, Kuya Ben, always said it was just a mechanical glitch. Old building, he'd laugh. These elevators have minds of their own. But elevators don't call themselves to the basement level when no one pressed the button. That's right. Every single night, the elevator would go down to B2, the lowest basement level where the storage rooms and maintenance areas are. The level that's supposed to be locked after 8 p.m. I should have paid attention to how Kuya Ben's hands would shake whenever he talked about those elevators. I should have noticed how the other guards avoided that wing after midnight. But I was new, eager to prove myself, and stupidly brave. The night everything changed, I was doing my regular rounds. The mall at night is eerie, even under normal circumstances. Those mannequins look like frozen people, the escalators create weird shadows, and every small sound echoes like a gunshot. But that night felt different, heavier. As I passed the jewelry section on the 2nd floor, I heard it. Children laughing. Soft, playful giggles coming from somewhere below. I stopped, straining to listen. The sound was coming from the direction of the east wing elevator shaft. But that was impossible. There are no children in the mall at 2 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the sound. That's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, standing by the elevator doors. She was wearing a white dress that seemed to glow in the dim emergency lighting. Her long black hair covered most of her face, but I could see she was facing the elevator doors, perfectly still. "Hey!" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty corridor. "You can't be here!" She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge me. I walked closer, my heart pounding. As I got within 10 feet of her, the elevator dinged. The doors opened, revealing complete darkness inside. The elevator lights weren't working. The little girl stepped inside. "Wait!" I shouted, breaking into a run, but just as I reached the elevator, the doors closed. I frantically pressed the call button, but nothing happened. Then I looked at the floor indicator above the doors. It was going down. B1, B2, then something impossible. B3. There is no B3 level in Starmall Alabang. The building plans only showed 2 basement levels. I stood there staring at that impossible floor indicator when I heard my radio crackle to life. "Miguel? This is Ben. Where are you?" "East wing, sir, by the elevator. There was a—" "Get away from that elevator right now!" The panic in his voice made my blood freeze. In 3 weeks, I had never heard Kuya Ben raise his voice. "Sir, get away! Miguel, run!" That's when I heard it. A sound that still haunts my dreams. From inside the elevator shaft, somewhere far below, came the sound of metal scraping against concrete, like claws, like something massive trying to climb up. And underneath that sound, children crying. What was in that basement level that didn't exist? Why was my supervisor so terrified? And who was that little girl? The truth about Starmall Alabang's hidden basement is darker than you can imagine. In part 2, I'll tell you what I discovered when I disobeyed orders and went down to B2 myself. If you're still watching, drop a comment below. Have you ever experienced anything paranormal in a shopping mall? Your story might be connected to mine.
I ran like my life depended on it. and maybe it did. That scraping sound from the elevator shaft followed me until I reached the main security office on the ground floor. Kuya Ben was waiting, his face pale as a corpse. You saw her, didn't you?" he asked, not even looking up from his desk. "The little girl? Who is she, and what the hell is B3? Kuya Ben was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out a flask from his drawer, something he'd never done before. After taking a long swig, he finally spoke. "Miguel, I'm going to tell you something, but you have to promise me you'll never go looking for answers. Some doors should stay closed." He told me that Starmall Alabang was built in 1991 on the site of an old residential area, but what the developers never disclosed was what happened to the families who refused to sell their land. "7 families," he whispered. "They held out until the very end. The Santillan family, the Reyes family, they had young children, beautiful children." According to Ben, construction perceived it anyway. One night, there was a terrible accident, or so the official reports claimed. A gas leak explosion and a partially completed basement level. 7 families died instantly. Their bodies were never recovered, buried under tons of concrete and steel. "The developers covered it up," Ben continued, his voice shaking, "built right over their graves. But the children, Miguel, the children never left." I felt my skin crawl. "You're saying those are ghosts?" "I'm saying there are things in this mall that should have been laid to rest 30 years ago. And that B3 level you saw? That's not supposed to exist because it's where the bodies are buried." But here's the thing that made my blood freeze. Ben pulled out old building blueprints, original construction documents from 1991, and there it was, clear as day, B3, labeled as Foundation Level, sealed. The mall was literally built on top of a mass grave, and somehow the elevator system could access it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that little girl's face. Who was she? What are the children who died in 1991? And why had she wanted me to follow her? Against every instinct, screaming at me to leave it alone, I made a decision that would change my life forever. The next night, I brought a crowbar. When 2:17 a.m. came around and the elevator dinged its usual call, I was ready. But this time, instead of watching it descend to the impossible B3 level, I pry opened the basement access door next to the elevator shaft. The stairwell was pitch black and reeked of dampness and something else, something sweet and rotten. Using my flashlight, I descended to B2, the official lowest level, but there, hidden behind a maintenance panel, I found something that shouldn't exist. Another staircase, going down. My hands were shaking as I removed the metal panel. The metal was warm to the touch, and I could swear I felt it pulse like a heartbeat. Behind it was a narrow concrete stairway that disappeared into absolute darkness. As I stepped on the first stair, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. My breath came out in visible puffs and my flashlight began to flicker. But I kept going down. The stairway ended at a heavy metal door marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, some kind of circle with intersecting lines. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see a faint, sickly green glow. That's when I heard them clearly for the first time. Children's voices, not crying now but singing a lullaby in Tagalog that my grandmother used to sing to me. "Tulog na bunso ko, tulog na, sa panganap mo'y masaya ka." But their voices were wrong, distorted, like they were singing through water or from very far away. I pushed the door open. What I saw beyond that threshold wasn't just B3. It was something that defied all logic and physics. The room stretched impossibly far in all directions, far larger than the mall's footprint above. The walls were covered in children's drawings, crude crayon pictures of houses, families, and stick figures holding hands. but many of the drawings showed dark figures with red eyes looming over the families. And scattered throughout this impossible space were toys. Hundreds of toys, dolls, toy cars, stuffed animals, all arranged in perfect circles around what looked like old foundation stones jutting up from the floor. But the children… I still haven't told you about the children. There were 7 of them sitting in a circle around the largest foundation stone, all wearing clothes from the early 1990s, all perfectly preserved as if they hadn't aged a day in 30 years, and all of them turned to look at me the moment I entered. "Kuya," the little girl said, the same one I'd be seen by the elevator. "We've been waiting for you." The others nodded in unison, their eyes black as coal. "Waiting for me? Why?" "Because," she smiled and her teeth were stained red, "we need someone to tell our story. We need someone to let people know we're still here, still trapped." One of the boys, maybe 9 years old, stood up. "The mall is getting stronger, Kuya. More people come every day. More energy, more life force. It feeds on the happiness of families shopping above us." "And we're so hungry," the little girl whispered. That's when I noticed the dozens of missing person posters scattered among the toys. People who had disappeared from the mall over the years. Security footage dates going back to 1991. Men, women, children, all last seen in Starmall Alabang. The children weren't the only ones trapped in B3. But what did they mean when they said the mall was feeding on the people above? In Part 3, I'll reveal the horrifying truth about what really happens to the missing people and why the children chose me to be their messenger. Drop a ghost in the comments if you're brave enough to keep watching. Your support gives me strength to tell this terrifying truth.
Standing in that otherworldly B3 level, surrounded by 7 dead children who looked as alive as you or me, I should have run. Every survival instinct was screaming at me to get out. But something kept me rooted to the spot, a horrible fascination with the truth. "You want to know about the missing people, don't you, Kuya Miguel?" the little girl in white asked, tilting her head in a way that no living child should be able to do. How did she know my name? I'd never introduced myself. She giggled at my confusion. "We know everything that happens in our mall. Every footstep above us, every heartbeat, every whispered conversation. We've been watching you since your first day." One of the older boys, maybe 12, picked up a handful of the missing person posters. Mrs. Elena Vasquez disappeared December 3rd, 2019. She was Christmas shopping for her grandchildren. He held up her photo, a smiling woman in her 60s. Mr. James Revelame vanished July 15, 2021. He was buying an engagement ring. "They didn't just disappear," the little girl continued. "They were chosen, just like you're being chosen now." Chosen for what? That's when she led me deeper into the impossible space, past the toys and drawings to an area I hadn't noticed before. The green glow was stronger here, emanating from what looked like old electrical panels embedded in the walls. But as we got closer, I realized they weren't electrical panels at all. They were viewing windows. And behind each window was a person. Not dead, not alive, suspended in some kind of translucent green fluid. Their eyes open but unseeing, their bodies perfectly preserved. I counted at least 30 windows, each containing someone who had disappeared from the mall over the years. Mrs. Vasquez was there, still wearing the same floral dress from her missing person poster. Mr. Revelame floated next to her, the engagement ring box still clutched in his hand. Children, teenagers, elderly people, all floating in that sickly green substance, all perfectly preserved. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "The harvest," said the boy matter-of-factly. "The mall needs energy to keep existing.
Happy energy, life force, love, joy, excitement. All the emotions people feel when they're shopping, eating, celebrating with family. But emotions fade. They need to be concentrated. The little girl pressed her small hand against one of the viewing windows. These people felt the strongest emotions the day they disappeared. Mrs. Elena was so happy about her grandchildren's Christmas gifts. Mr. James was overflowing with love for his fiancée. The mall captured that emotion, bottled it up, and now it feeds on it forever.
I felt sick. They're still alive in there? In a way. Their bodies are preserved, their emotions harvested continuously. They experience their happiest moment over and over again, and the mall feeds on that joy. It's quite efficient, actually. But then something clicked in my mind. If the mall can do this, why are you children still here? Why aren't you in those tanks? The 7 children exchanged glances, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in their coal black eyes. Because we're different, the little girl whispered. We died angry, we died afraid, we died wanting revenge. Our emotions are too bitter for the mall to digest, so we're stuck here, watching, waiting, growing stronger. Stronger? The mall made a mistake when it built over our graves, another child spoke up, a girl with pigtails who couldn't have been more than 8 when she died. It tried to contain us, but it only gave us power. Every year we grow stronger, and every year we gain more control over this place. The boy who had shown me the posters grinned, revealing teeth that had grown into razor-sharp fangs. We can make the elevators move. We can cause accidents in the escalators. We can make people get lost in the corridors that shouldn't exist. And soon, we'll be strong enough to break free, the little girl finished. But we need help. We need someone on the outside, someone alive who can tell our story, who can warn people, who can help us get justice for what was done to us. That's when I understood. You didn't choose me randomly, did you? She smiled that terrible red-stained smile. Miguel Santos, born October 13, 1995. Mother, Carmen Santos. Father, Roberto Santos, former construction worker who helped build this mall in 1991. My blood turned to ice. My father, he worked on this mall? He knew about the accident. He knew about the families. He helped pour the concrete that sealed our bodies in the foundation. And now, his son works here, walking above our graves every night. The room started spinning. My father had always been vague about his construction jobs in the 90s. Whenever I asked about Starmall, he'd change the subject or leave the room. He feels guilty, the little girl continued. We can sense it. 30 years of guilt, knowing he helped cover up our deaths. That guilt is like a beacon to us. It's how we knew you'd be the one to help us. What do you want me to do? Expose the truth. Tell the world what this mall really is. Make them tear it down so our bodies can be properly buried and we can finally rest. And if I refuse? All 7 children stepped closer, and the temperature in the room dropped so low that frost began forming on the viewing windows. Then you'll join the harvest, the little girl said sweetly. Your father's guilt makes your emotions especially flavorful. The mall would love to feed on that for eternity. As if summoned by her words, I heard a familiar sound echoing from somewhere above us, the elevator dinging. But this time it was different. Instead of the usual single ding, it kept ringing, over and over again. That's your ride back up, Kuya Miguel, the little girl said. Take the elevator to the ground floor. Go home. Think about what we've told you. But don't take too long to decide. How long do I have? Her smile widened, showing more of those blood-red teeth.
Until the next full moon. 3 days. And if I try to quit, if I just never come back, the mall will find you. It found all the others who tried to leave before telling our story. Mrs. Santos from the day shift who saw us in the mirrors. Mr. De Leon from maintenance who heard us in the air vents. Security guard Flores who tried to report the missing people to the police. My heart stopped. Flores? He didn't resign. He's down here, isn't he? She nodded toward a viewing window I hadn't noticed before. Inside, floating in that green fluid, was Mang Flores, the guard who had supposedly quit the month before I was hired. I had 3 days to decide. Expose the truth about Starmall Alabang and help the children find peace, or become the mall's next permanent harvest. But what I didn't know was that the children weren't telling me everything. In Part 4, I'll reveal the horrifying truth about what the children really wanted and why my father's connection to this place ran deeper than I ever imagined. Comment FIRE if this story is keeping you awake at night. Your engagement helps me find the courage to tell the rest of this nightmare.
3 days, that's all I had. But what I discovered about my father changed everything. I confronted Papa that same morning, showed up at his house at 6 a.m., still shaking from what I'd seen in B3. When I mentioned Starmall Alabang, he went white as a sheet. "How do you know about that place?" he whispered. "I work there, Papa. I know about the 7 families. I know about the children." He broke down completely. Through his tears, he told me the truth, but not the truth the children wanted me to believe. "Miguel, those children, they're not innocent victims," he sobbed. "The explosion wasn't an accident, and it wasn't the developers who caused it." According to Papa, the 7 families had been involved in something dark. They weren't just refusing to sell their land, they were protecting something underneath it. An old ritual site where they'd been practicing black magic for generations. They were sacrificing people, Miguel, missing persons from nearby barangays. The children, they were raised in that cult. When the developers came, the families knew they were exposed. So what happened? They triggered the explosion themselves, a final ritual to bind their souls to the land forever. They wanted to become something more powerful than human. The children volunteered to die so their spirits could anchor the spell. My blood ran cold. "You mean they chose to become what they are now?" Papa nodded. "And every year since 1991, they've grown stronger. The mall isn't feeding on emotions to survive. The children are using it as a harvesting ground. They're collecting souls to perform a massive resurrection ritual." Resurrection of what? Their master, something ancient and evil that their families served for centuries. The mall is just the covering. Underneath, they've been building an army of trapped souls for 30 years. Suddenly, everything made sense. The children weren't victims, they were predators. They didn't want justice, they wanted power. And they'd been manipulating me from the beginning. "Papa, how do you know all this?" He pulled out a wooden box from under his bed. Inside were old photographs, ritual symbols, and a leather journal. Because I wasn't just a construction worker, Miguel. I was part of the team sent to stop them. Government agents, priests, folk healers, we knew what those families were planning. But you failed. We were too late. By the time we got there, the ritual was complete. All we could do was contain them. The mall was built as a prison, not a cover-up. Every beam, every foundation stone, every electrical circuit was blessed and inscribed with binding symbols to keep them trapped. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes desperate. "Miguel, if you've been talking to those children, if they've asked you to help them, you have to understand, they're not trying to find peace. They're trying to break free and complete their master's resurrection."
What happens if they succeed? The end of everything good in this world. That night, I returned to the mall for my shift, but everything had changed. Now I could see the binding symbols carved into the walls, hidden in plain sight. I could feel the supernatural prison holding the children back. But I could also sense something else. The prison was weakening. The children had lied to me about everything. But now that I knew the truth, could I stop them? Or was I already too late?
This is it, the night that would determine whether evil triumphed or humanity survived. Everything led to this moment, and I almost didn't make it out alive. Armed with Papa's leather journal and a bag full of blessed salt, holy water, and iron nails, I returned to Starmall Alabang for what I knew would be my last shift. The journal contained the original binding ritual. If I could strengthen the symbols before the full moon reached its peak, I might be able to contain the children for another generation. But the moment I entered the mall, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. The lights were flickering in patterns that hurt to look at. The elevator doors were opening and closing by themselves in a rhythmic sequence. And every single mannequin in every store window had turned to face the East Wing elevator. I wasn't alone. Kuya Ben was there, but he wasn't himself anymore. His eyes were completely black, and when he spoke, his voice echoed with the sound of 7 children speaking in unison. "Hello, Miguel. We've been waiting for you to come back and fulfill your promise." "I know what you really are," I said, backing toward the emergency exit. "I know about the cult, the ritual, your master." The thing wearing Ben's face smiled with too many teeth. "Did Daddy tell you bedtime stories? How precious. But it doesn't matter what you know now. The harvest is complete." That's when I saw them. The viewing windows from B3 were now visible throughout the mall, embedded in every wall, every pillar, every surface. Hundreds of them. The missing people from 30 years weren't just in the basement, they were integrated into the mall's very structure, their trapped souls forming a massive supernatural battery. Tonight, under the full moon, we use their combined life force to break the binding ritual permanently, Ben Thing continued. Our master will rise, and this world will become a feeding ground for entities like us. I ran for the East Wing elevator, clutching Papa's journal. If I could reach B3 and disrupt the central binding symbol, I might be able to reverse the process. But the mall itself was fighting me now. Escalators moved in wrong directions, corridors stretched impossibly long, and store gates slammed shut to block my path. The 7 children appeared throughout the mall, no longer confined to B3. They'd grown enormous, their child forms stretching and distorting into nightmare shapes with 2 long limbs and mouths full of razor teeth. "You can't stop us, Miguel!" the little girl in white shrieked from somewhere above me. "We've been planning this for 30 years!" I finally reached the elevator shaft and climbed down to B3. But what I found there defied all logic. The impossible space had expanded into a vast underground cathedral with the viewing windows forming intricate patterns on every surface. At the center, where the foundation stones used to be, stood a massive altar carved from black stone. And floating above it, beginning to take solid form, was their master. I can't adequately describe what I saw. Imagine every nightmare you've ever had, every shadow that made you run as a child, every primal fear encoded in human DNA, and you'd still fall short of understanding the horror that was materializing above that altar. But Papa's journal had prepared me for this moment.
I began reading the binding ritual aloud in Latin, throwing blessed salt in the pattern described in the journal, driving iron nails into the key points around the altar. The children's screams were deafening. "No! We were so close!" The entity above the altar turned its attention to me, and when it spoke, reality itself seemed to crack around its words. "Foolish mortal, you merely delay the inevitable." But I kept reading, kept throwing salt, kept driving nails. The viewing windows began cracking, and I could hear the trapped souls inside crying out in relief as they were finally freed. One by one, the children began shrinking back to their normal sizes, their power diminishing as their battery of harvested souls was disconnected. The binding ritual was working, but it came at a cost. Each word I spoke aged me. Each nail I drove cost me years of life. I could feel myself growing older, weaker, but I didn't stop. "You think you've won?" the little girl gasped as she faded back into a normal child's form. "This is only one site. There are others. Shopping malls, office buildings, apartment complexes. We've been busy for 30 years. As the last nail was driven and the final binding word spoken, the underground cathedral collapsed in on itself. I barely escaped through the elevator shaft as B3 sealed itself permanently beneath tons of concrete and steel. When I emerged at ground level, Kuya Ben was himself again, with no memory of what had happened. The missing people from the viewing windows were scattered throughout the mall, alive but unconscious, with no memory of their time in captivity. But I was changed. The ritual had aged me 20 years in a single night. My hair was streaked with gray, my face lined with premature wrinkles. I'd bought humanity time, but at the cost of my own youth.
I quit that morning and moved to Cebu, but I never stopped watching. Monitoring news reports, investigating other mysterious disappearances, tracking down locations where reality seemed just a little bit off. Because the little girl was right. Starmall Alabang was just one site. And somewhere out there, other children are waiting, other rituals are being prepared, other ancient evils are stirring beneath the foundations of our modern world. So the next time you're in a shopping mall, an office building, or any large structure that seems just a little too quiet, just a little too cold, remember my story. And if you ever hear children laughing where there shouldn't be any children, if elevators go to floors that don't exist, if you see people in the walls behind windows that shouldn't be there, run. Don't be a hero like I was, because not everyone who goes down to the basement levels comes back up. This is Miguel Santos signing off. May you never have to learn these truths for yourself. The end. Thank you for watching Lagim ng Starmall Alabang, The Haunting Beneath the Mall. If this story kept you awake at night, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because there are more horror stories from the Philippines waiting to be told. Drop a comment below if you've experienced anything supernatural in public places. Your story might be the next one I investigate. Remember, some doors should never be opened. Some truths are better left buried. And some places should never be built at all.